The air inside the Crimson Lounge didn't smell like cigarettes or sweat. It smelled of expensive bourbon, heavy perfume, and the metallic tang of fear. This was a subterranean palace of red velvet and gold fixtures, a place where the city's monsters came to pretend they were gentlemen. I was Demi Watkins, the floor manager. To everyone watching, I was just the woman in the red silk blouse who made sure the crystal glasses sparkled and the wine never stopped flowing. I had bangs that curtained my eyes and a practiced smile that never quite reached them. I survived in this world by following 3 simple rules: pour the drink, look pretty, and never, ever listen. But tonight, the silence was louder than the music. It was a Tuesday, usually slow, but table 1 was occupied. In the underworld hierarchy, table 1 was the throne. And tonight, the king was holding court, George Davis. I'd never been this close to him before. The rumors said he was fighting a silent war with the rival Valenti family, a war bleeding into the streets. Up close, he was terrifyingly beautiful. He wore a black suit that cost more than my life's earnings, tailored to hide the shoulder holster I knew was there. His hair was a severe buzz cut, his beard groomed to perfection, but it was the ink that held your attention. Intricate dark tattoos crept up from his collar, strangling his neck like ivy, disappearing into his hairline. A small cross was inked under his left eye, a permanent tear of mourning. Or perhaps a warning. He sat alone, save for his enforcer Silas, a mountain of a man standing by the velvet rope. George stared at his glass of scotch as if reading the future in the amber liquid. I approached with the check, my heels sinking into the plush carpet. "Mr. Davis," I said, voice steady. "Another round, or shall I close the tab?" He didn't look up. His finger adorned with a heavy silver ring tapped the rim of his glass. "Leave the bottle," he rumbled. His voice vibrated in your chest like thunder. "And clear the section. I'm expecting company." Of course, I reached for the empty glass. That's when it happened. The burner phone taped to my inner thigh vibrated. I froze. That phone wasn't supposed to exist. It was a relic of a life I thought I'd buried, a direct line to my younger brother, Toby. We had a system. 1 vibration meant, "I need money." 2 meant, "Police." It vibrated 3 times. Code black, my blood turned to ice. Code black meant imminent death. It meant the sharks had circled and the water was already red. If I didn't answer within 60 seconds to confirm the drop, Toby would be executed. I looked at George, still staring at his drink. I looked at Silas, watching the door. I made a choice that would end my life as I knew it. Before we continue, I need to be honest with you. This story took over 12 hours to write, edit, and produce. The research, the voice work, the editing, it's a labor of love. If you appreciate the effort that goes into bringing you these cinematic stories every day, the least you could do is hit that subscribe button. It's free. It takes 1 second, and it helps us keep creating. Now let's continue. I took a half step back, turning my body slightly, shielding my movements with the serving tray. I reached into my skirt pocket where I'd transferred the phone minutes ago and slid it to my ear. "Talk," I whispered. "They found me, Dem." Toby's voice was a wet, jagged sob. "The Valentis. They know I shorted the shipment. They're coming through the door right in." "Listen to me," I hissed, my voice dropping into a dialect I hadn't spoken since my father died. It wasn't English. It wasn't quite Italian. It was ghost code, a dead language of street spies. "Eagle is down. Sector 4, burn the nest." Translation: hide. "I'm coming. Destroy the evidence." I hung up and shoved the phone back, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. I spun around, ready to sprint to the kitchen, grab my bag, and run. I slammed into a wall of muscle. It wasn't Silas. I looked up, breath hitching. George Davis stood inches from me. He'd moved with the silent, predatory speed of a panther. He wasn't looking at his drink anymore. He was looking at me. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and utterly devoid of mercy. He reached out his hand, large and warm, and gripped my chin, tilting my face up to the crimson light. "That wasn't Italian," he said softly. I couldn't breathe. I don't know what you mean, sir. It was a personal call. My mother." "Don't lie to me, Demi." He said my name like he tasted it. "I know every dialect spoken in this city. The Russians, the Albanians, the Sicilians. But what you just spoke, that belongs to a ghost story." He stepped closer, trapping me against the table. "Who taught you the cleaner's tongue?" Panic spiked. If he knew the code, he knew who my father was. And if he knew who my father was, he knew I was valuable. Please, I whispered, the waitress mask shattering. I have to go. My family is in trouble. George studied my face, searching for something. Then his eyes shifted to the door. The heavy wooden doors burst open. 6 men in trench coats walked in. The Valentis. The company George was expecting had arrived early, and they weren't here to talk. Get down, George commanded. He didn't wait for me to react. He shoved me under the heavy oak table just as the first gunshot shattered the bottle of scotch he'd been drinking. Chaos erupted. The Crimson Lounge transformed into a shooting gallery. Glass rained down like diamonds. I curled into a ball, hands over my ears, screaming silently. Above me, suppressed pistol fire hissed like angry snakes. It lasted less than a minute. George Davis didn't fight like a thug. He fought like a soldier, efficient, brutal. Silence fell, heavy and thick. Clear, Silas's voice boomed. A hand reached under the table. George's hand, speckled with blood, none of it his. Come out, he said. I crawled out, knees shaking so hard I could barely stand. The room was a ruin. 3 Valenti men lay on the floor. The others had fled. I looked at the exit. I have to go, I choked out. My brother. George wiped a spot of blood from his cheek with a handkerchief. He looked at me, then at Silas, who had his gun trained on my chest. Let her go, boss, Silas asked, bored. Or do I clean this up? George looked at me. He saw the terror, yes, but he also saw the woman who'd coolly issued a tactical command in a dead language seconds before a shootout. He saw an asset. He walked over, looming tall and terrifying. He reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. You said Eagle is down, George murmured, scrolling through my texts. He looked up, eyes locking onto mine. That means your brother is the one who stole the Valenti shipment, the shipment I was supposed to intercept. I stopped breathing. I can fix it, I pleaded. I can get him out. No, you can't, George said. You're a waitress, Demi. You serve drinks. You don't stop wars. He pocketed my phone. Silas, George said, turning his back to me. Yeah, boss. 2 in the head? George paused. He looked back at me over his shoulder, red lights casting shadows over his tattoos, making the ink look like it was moving. No, George said. Don't let her leave. I want her alive. Hours later, I wasn't taken to a dungeon. I was taken to the sky. George's penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city skyline. Cold, sterile, breathtakingly expensive. Silas had confiscated my purse, my keys, my shoes. I sat on white leather, barefoot, hugging a cushion to my chest. The door opened. George walked in, changed into a black turtleneck that emphasized his shoulders and the tattoos creeping up his throat. He carried 2 glasses of water, set one in front of me. Drink, he ordered. You're in shock. I ignored the water. Is he dead? My voice was hollow. My brother. George sat in the armchair opposite me, leaning forward, elbows on knees. Not yet. My men picked him up 5 minutes before the Valentis got there. He's in a holding cell in the basement of this building. I sobbed with relief, burying my face in my hands. Don't thank me, George said sharply. He stole from the Valentis, which means he interfered with my business. By rights, I should hand him over as a peace offering. I snapped my head up. You can't. They'll skin him alive. I know, George said calmly. That's usually the price for stupidity. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at city lights. But then there's you. George turned to face me. You speak ghost code. That means you're the daughter of Marcus, the Whisper Watkins. I stiffened. He's dead. He was the best intelligence gatherer this city ever saw, George corrected. He knew everything about everyone because he knew how to be invisible. He taught you, didn't he? He taught me how to survive, I said defensively. He taught you to listen, George said. He walked back to me, stopping inches from my knees. My organization has a leak. Someone's feeding information to the Valentis. That's how they knew about the shipment your brother stole. I have 100 soldiers, Demi. Killers, enforcers, accountants. But I don't have a listener. He reached out and touched a strand of my hair. His touch was electric, terrifying, and oddly gentle. Here's the deal, he said. I keep your brother alive. I pay off his debt. I give him a clean slate. And in return? I whispered. In return, you belong to me, George said. You don't serve drinks anymore. You sit by my side at dinners. You attend meetings. You wear the clothes I buy you. You look pretty. And you listen. You listen for the lies, the codes, the whispers. You find my leak." He held out his hand. "Refuse." And I opened the basement door and let the Valentis have your brother. I looked at his hand. It was a hand that had ended lives, that gripped the city by the throat, but it was also the only hand offering me a lifeline. I thought of Toby, stupid, reckless Toby. I thought of my father, who warned me never to get involved in the life. I stood up. I was smaller than him, softer, but I raised my chin. "I have one condition," I said. George raised an eyebrow, amused. "You're in no position to bargain, Miss Watkins. I want to be the one to tell him," I said. "When we find the leak, I want to be the one who points the finger." George smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a shark's grin. "Done." I placed my hand in his. His grip was iron. "Welcome to the family, Demi," he said. "Try to stay alive." The transformation was swift and absolute. The next morning, the red waitress uniform was gone. In its place was a wardrobe straight from a Milan runway. Silk dresses in emerald, sapphire, and oxblood. Tailored blazers, stilettos that could puncture a lung. "You are no longer Demi the waitress," George told me as I stepped out of the bedroom wearing a midnight blue gown that clung to every curve. "You are Sophia, my consultant." "Consultant?" I adjusted the diamond necklace he'd clasped around my throat. It felt heavy, like a collar. "It implies intimacy and intellect," George said, checking his watch. "It makes people nervous. Good." For the next 2 weeks, I lived in the eye of the storm. I accompanied George everywhere. Underground casinos, dockside warehouses, high society galas. I played my part. I held his arm, laughed at bad jokes from corrupt politicians, sipped champagne, but mostly, I listened. I listened to the cadence of voices. I watched the micro-expressions of his lieutenants. I tapped my pearl earring, a signal we'd agreed upon whenever I sensed deception. And George was a revelation. I'd expected a brute. I found a tactician. He treated me with strange, cold courtesy. He never touched me without permission, never raised his voice. But the tension between us was growing a taut wire ready to snap. I saw it in the way he watched me across rooms. I felt it in the heat of his hand on the small of my back as he guided me through crowds. He was dangerous, lethal, and utterly captivating. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday. We were in a meeting with the Russian cartel at a private cigar bar. The air was thick with smoke. The Russians were pushing for a new route through the harbor. Their leader, a man named Volkov, was smiling, promising loyalty. I watched Volkov's hands. He was tapping his cigar in a rhythmic pattern. 3 taps, pause, 1 tap, Morse code, stalling. I touched my necklace. George didn't even look at me. He simply stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, "The deal is off, Volkov. If you're waiting for your backup to arrive, they're going to be disappointed." My men secured the perimeter 10 minutes ago. Volkov's face went pale. As we walked out to the waiting SUV, rain hammering against the roof, George pulled me into the back seat. The city lights blurred through tinted windows. "How did you know?" he asked, voice rough. "His hands," I said, adrenaline still coursing through me. He was signaling a delay. He was waiting for an ambush. George looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time, the coldness in his eyes fractured, revealing something burning underneath. "You're dangerous, Demi," he murmured. "I'm just doing my job." George reached out and traced the line of my jaw with his thumb. His skin was rough, calloused from violence. "You're good at it. Too good. It makes me wonder why you were wasting your time pouring wine." "I was hiding," I whispered. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said. He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming. He tasted of scotch and smoke. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, as if he wanted to absorb me. I kissed him back, forgetting the danger, forgetting that he was the monster of my story. In that moment, he was just the man who saw me. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. Our breathing was ragged, synchronized. "You look good in red," he whispered, referencing the night we met. "But you look better in my darkness." I should have been afraid. I should have remembered that this was a transaction, that I was collateral for my brother's life. But when George looked at me like that, like I was the most dangerous weapon in his arsenal, I felt powerful for the first time in my life. "What happens when we find the leak?" I asked quietly. Then you're free, George said, but his grip on my waist tightened. If you want to be, and if I don't want to be free? George's eyes darkened. Then I'll keep you. The SUV pulled up to the penthouse. Silas opened the door, pretending he hadn't heard everything. George stepped out first, then offered me his hand. I took it. As we walked into the building, his fingers laced through mine. It was possessive. It was claiming. And God help me, I didn't want him to let go. 3 days later, I found the leak. It wasn't one of his lieutenants. It wasn't a rival. I was in George's study, going through surveillance logs from the basement holding cells. I wanted to check on Toby. I wanted to see my brother, to make sure he was eating, to reassure myself I was doing this for a reason. I put on the headphones and turned up the volume on cell 4. Toby was sitting on his cot. He was talking to the guard. Tell Valenti the drop is tonight, Toby was saying, his voice clear and arrogant. Tell him Davis trusts my sister. She's in his bed now. She's stupid. She thinks she's saving me, but she's just buying me time to get the account numbers. My world stopped. The guard laughed. You're a cold bastard, Toby. Selling out your own sister? Demi? Toby scoffed. She's always been a martyr. She loves playing the victim. Once I get George's offshore codes, Valenti promised me a cut. We kill Davis, we kill the girl, and I disappear to Rio. I sat there, frozen, as the recording played on. My brother wasn't a victim. He was the villain. He hadn't just stolen from the Valentis, he was working with them. He'd orchestrated this entire situation to get inside George's operation, and he was using me as his Trojan horse. The door to the study opened. George stood there. He looked at my face, at the tears streaming down my cheeks, and then at the screen showing Toby. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't rage. He walked over, pulled the headphones off my ears, and gently wiped my tears with his thumb. I suspected, he said softly, but I needed you to see it. He's going to kill us, I whispered, voice breaking. He's going to kill me. He's going to try, George said, his eyes hardened into diamonds. Tonight is the drop? I nodded. Good, George said. He pulled a gun from his waistband and checked the chamber. Let's go give your brother a going-away party. We didn't go to the basement. We went back to where it started, the Crimson Lounge. George knew the attack would happen there. It was the center of his power, and destroying it and him was the only way Valenti could win. The club was empty of customers. Just George, Silas, a dozen loyal soldiers, and me. Stay behind the bar, George told me, handing me a sleek silver pistol. Do you know how to use this? My father taught me, I said, checking the weight. It felt heavy. Real. Good girl. George gathered his men in a semicircle. His voice was calm, controlled. They'll come in through the front. Explosives, most likely. Smoke grenades to cover their approach. Valenti wants this public, wants to send a message that I'm weak. He looked at each man. Let them think they've won. Let them get inside. Then we close the trap. Silas grinned. Like shooting fish in a barrel, boss. Exactly. George turned to me. Demi, if things go sideways, there's a panic room behind the wine cellar. Biometric lock. I've programmed your thumbprint. You get there, you lock yourself in, and you wait for me. And if you don't come? I asked. George's jaw tightened. Then you use the phone in there to call my lawyer. He'll get you out of the city. George, he cupped my face with both hands. You've given me 2 weeks of peace in a lifetime of war. If tonight is the end, know that you were worth it. He kissed me, soft this time, almost tender. Then he pulled away and checked his watch. Positions. They'll be here in 10 minutes. I moved behind the bar, crouching low. The mahogany was solid, reinforced would stop most bullets. I gripped the pistol, safety off, and waited. The red lights of the lounge cast everything in crimson. It looked like the world was already bleeding. George stood in the center of the room, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. Like he was waiting for a business meeting, not an assassination. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At midnight, the doors didn't open. They exploded. The front of the club disintegrated in a shower of wood and glass. Smoke grenades hissed across the floor, filling the red room with gray fog. Gunfire erupted instantly, deafening and chaotic. I crouched behind the mahogany bar, glass shattering above my head as bullets decimated rows of expensive liquor. The smell of alcohol and gunpowder was choking. Through the haze, I saw him. Toby. He walked in behind the Valenti hitmen, wearing a smug grin. He wasn't scared. He was enjoying it. "George!" Toby shouted over the gunfire. "Come on out. I know you're in here. Bring my sister. I promise to make it quick for her." Something snapped inside me. I stood up. I shouldn't have. It was tactically stupid. But the rage in my chest was hotter than the fire spreading across the curtains. "Toby!" I screamed. He spotted me. His grin faltered for a second, replaced by annoyance. "Demi, get out of the way. You served your purpose. You sold me out," I yelled, leveling the pistol at him. "I gave up everything for you. You were always weak," Toby spat. He raised his gun. He never got the chance to pull the trigger. George Davis rose from the shadows of Table 1 like a demon from hell. He didn't fire a gun. He threw a knife. It was a fluid, violent motion. The silver blade flashed through the smoke and buried itself in Toby's shoulder. Toby screamed, dropping his gun. "That's for her," George roared. Then George opened fire with a submachine gun, mowing down the 2 Valenti men standing beside my brother. The tide turned. George's men, emboldened by their boss's ferocity, pushed forward. The remaining attackers scrambled, realizing they'd walked into a kill box. In minutes, it was over. The silence returned, heavier than before. Toby lay on the floor, clutching his shoulder, whimpering. George walked over to him, boots crunching on broken glass. He kicked Toby's gun away and stood over him. "Please," Toby gasped, looking at me. Demi, tell him, I'm your brother." George looked at me. He held out his hand, waiting. I walked out from behind the bar. My red dress was torn, my hair wild, my face smeared with soot. I looked down at the boy I'd protected my whole life. The boy who'd planned to kill me for a payout. I looked at George. He was covered in blood, breathing hard, tattoos stark against his skin. He wasn't asking me to kill Toby. He was letting me choose. "He's not my brother," I said, voice cold and steady. "My brother died the moment he took that call." I looked at George. "Get him out of my city." George nodded. He signaled Silas. "Dump him at the police station with the evidence of the Valenti deal. Let the law bury him. He doesn't deserve a warrior's death." Silas dragged a screaming Toby out the back exit. I stood there, trembling as the adrenaline crashed. I felt arms wrap around me from behind. Strong, safe arms. "It's over," George whispered into my hair. I turned in his arms and buried my face in his chest. "What now?" "Now." George pulled back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. Not a burner. A sleek, encrypted smartphone. He handed it to me. "Now, we rebuild," he said. "And you listen." He walked over to Table 1, the only table still standing amidst the wreckage. He pulled out a chair. Not the guest chair, the chair next to his. "Sit, Demi," he said. I walked over. I sat down. I crossed my legs and looked at the man who had kidnapped me, saved me, and freed me. The Crimson Lounge was in ruins, but for the first time, I wasn't worried about the mess. "I'm listening," I said. George smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. "Good, because I have a plan, and I need a partner." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "The Valentis are weak now, leaderless. Their organization will fracture within a week. We're going to absorb the profitable pieces and let the rest burn." "And the police?" I asked. "The police have bigger problems than us," George said. "With Toby's testimony and the evidence we planted, they'll be busy for months." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The tattoos, the scars, the eyes that had seen too much death. He was a monster, but he was my monster. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "What you do best," George said. He reached across the table and took my hand. "You listen, you watch, you tell me who to trust and who to bury." "And us?" I whispered. George's grip tightened. "There is no us without you, Demi. You're not my property. You're not my employee. You're my equal, my partner, my queen." He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. "If you want to walk away right now, I'll let you go. I'll give you money, a new identity, a fresh start anywhere in the world." I looked at the ruins around us, at the empire built on blood and fear, at the man who'd given me a choice when no one else would. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. George smiled. "Then welcome home, Sophia." The city outside was waking up. Sirens wailed in the distance. But inside the Crimson Lounge, at Table 1, a new dynasty was born. If you believe in second chances, if you think people deserve to choose their own destiny, then prove it by subscribing right now. Demi chose her path. You can choose to support content that matters. Only those who don't believe in growth and redemption will scroll past without subscribing. Don't be that person. Hit subscribe right now. 6 months later, the Crimson Lounge had been rebuilt. Bigger. Better. The red velvet was richer. The gold fixtures gleamed brighter. It was a monument to survival. I stood at the bar, wearing a crimson dress that matched the decor. My hair was longer now, styled in elegant waves. The diamond necklace around my throat. George's gift caught the light. "Sophia," George called from Table 1. I walked over, heels clicking against marble. He stood as I approached, pulling out my chair. I sat beside him, and he returned to his seat. On the table was a dossier. I opened it. "The Castellano family," George explained. "They're moving drugs through the port, stepping on our territory." I studied the surveillance photos. I watched the body language in the images. I read the transcripts of wiretapped calls. "The oldest son," I said, tapping a photo. "Marco. He's skimming from his father. He's the weak link." George smiled. "How do you want to play it?" "I'll reach out," I said. "Offer him a better deal. He flips on his family. We get the port, and he gets to live. And if he refuses," I closed the dossier. "Then we make an example." George leaned back, studying me. "You've changed. You made me dangerous," I said. "No," George corrected. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "I just gave you permission to stop hiding." He stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." I took his hand. He led me to the center of the empty club. Music played slow, haunting. We moved together in the crimson light. "Do you regret it?" George asked quietly. "Staying?" I looked up at him. At the man who'd seen past the waitress to the warrior underneath. "Not for a second," I said. He kissed me. And in that moment, surrounded by the ruins we'd rebuilt, I knew I was finally home. Thank you for watching.